For the last 5 years, I've been writing about the most obscure stories I can find from history. Here are the top three most obscure. The Hounds of Hell's Hollow were an alleged terror cult that operated out of a graveyard in Decatur, Illinois. They had a crystal ball reader who would tell them who to terrorize next, and they did just about every terrible thing you could think of. And these stories were sensational and super popular at the time. I mean, obviously, if you're talking about grave robbing and rum running and murders and violence, like people read that. The problem is, it never happened. I first read about this story in a book called Weird Illinois, where it had like a quarter of a page dedicated to it, and it totally passed it off as being true. And then I saw it in some urban legend blogs, and nobody ever really did the work to see what was actually real. They just kind of said that it had happened and was super spooky. If you do the actual research, you will find that a reporter named Roby Parks made the story up after going to Decatur's police station and stealing the records of people whose deaths hadn't been solved, and then they stitched it together into this crazy story. And if that sounds like a lot of work to fake a story, it is, but it made sense because the newspapers at the time, specifically in the Midwest, were in a war to see who could sell the most, and they did not care about printing the truth, they only cared about how many people purchased their papers. The second is the story of Herbert Galembo. I am pretty sure I'm the only person that's ever written about this. The episode of my podcast about him is mediocre because I filled the first half of it with some nonsense to make it long enough to get ads on it, which is probably not great. Herbert Galembo was your typical all-American kid. Good grades, good attendance, and then he went off to World War II, and when he came back, he was just never the same. He allegedly killed a mystery novel writer in her home, and the guilt was actually placed on this man, Bayard Jenkins. After the crime, Galembo fled the state, and Bayard Jenkins just happened to be in the wrong time and the wrong place, and the cops, I'm sure, had a certain bias against him as a young African-American man trying to be an entrepreneur in the 40s. Bayard Jenkins was going door to door selling ice, and he was wrangled by the police. They interrogated him, probably unlawfully from what I found, and they extracted a confession from him and put him on death row. When Galembo learned that a 19-year-old boy had been accused of the crime that he committed, he actually got drunk in a bar and confessed to the police for the whole thing, and that just wasn't enough to save Bayard Jenkins. With the help of the NAACP, he was spared death row, but was still sentenced to life in prison for a crime that somebody else confessed to. And the most obscure story that I've ever done. I know for sure nobody's ever written or talked about this except for me. I did a 20-minute episode on some random person's life that I found in a newspaper. I just followed every newspaper story that I could about this person. He was a coffee maker salesman in the 50s and 60s, just a totally average guy. And it was a super challenging thing to write about, but he did get himself involved in a very interesting philanthropic mystery shopper fundraiser situation that was just riveting.